Okay, before I get into each region and the individual matchups, I wanted to do a quick little intro video discussing some takeaways from the first two rounds, kind of talk about what we've learned from those rounds and go over some of the talking points we may have been hearing from some of the so-called experts all week. Big one is how well underdogs have been coming through. They're hitting roughly 63%, 32-19 so far. My theory on this is simple. These major programs are top schools who have that annual turnover of talent or one-and-done players leaving after freshman or sophomore year. Those schools rely real heavily on preseason camps to kind of gel and form team, continuity. This being a COVID season, those schools didn't have that luxury. Now, the smaller schools or mid-major conferences, they typically have players returning or a bulk of their production returning and don't need as much time in preseason to kind of gel and form that bond. This basically makes those top teams a little bit more weaker, in my opinion, kind of closes the gap from the bigger programs to the mid-majors, and I think more so this year, some of those higher seeds from weaker conferences were just a little bit better, ultimately, providing value on them, and, some of them just happened to win outright too, as well as covering. Another big trend was how well unders were coming in, hitting at a decent clip for both full game and for first half. Full game unders 28, 21, and 2, good enough for 57%. The first half unders 31, 19, and 1, good enough for 62%. This, in my opinion, has more of a definitive explanation. And I talked about this a little bit in the previous video I did in March Madness. Unfamiliar gyms and sight lines. Now, some of you who watched the earlier games this past weekend may have noticed the sunlight shining through one end of the gym at a few locations. The announcers picked up on it a few times, and the glare from the sun was certainly noticeable, especially at that Bankers Life Fieldhouse site, where before the Oregon-Iowa game, the unders at that gym were 14-1. It's safe to say that location wasn't shooter-friendly, especially with the glare of the sun, but a big difference this year was how the teams had to switch arenas after every game. Unlike previous years, the teams play at one location for the first two rounds, but this past weekend, no team except for Arkansas played in the same arena for games 1 and 2. This is something to keep an eye on going forward, especially when you add in the fact that the first two rounds, these teams didn't have a lot of like on-court, shoot-around time because so many other teams were there at these sites, either playing a game on the court or, scheduled practices. It made it tough to form any type of familiarity. Now this might change going forward. Teams will have a week to prepare. They're going to be on location. But regardless, make sure to take a look at each team and how many times they've played at each location. For example, a team like Baylor right now, they're going to be playing a back-to-back at that Hinkle Fieldhouse location, playing against Villanova, who's yet to play a game at that location. So, that could be an edge right there. I'm going to list in the community, the Discord community, the tournament locations and the teams that have played at each location, so make sure to check that out. Lastly, one other factor I want to talk about is, which I did discuss in the previous March Madness video, is the importance of experience. Specifically on the coaching side, the turnaround between these games is so quick. On the second games, you don't always know which team you're playing or who to prepare for. Experienced coaches have an edge when only having 1 day to prep for 2 potential opponents. That's why we've seen some of the more experienced tournament coaches advance, and it really shouldn't be a big surprise coaches like Jay Wright and Jim Boeheim are still alive and kind of doing more with less. But next up, I'm going to be breaking down each region and the matchups. If you care to listen to that, make sure to click that bell on the notifications because they're not posted yet, but I will be posting them at some point on Thursday, today being Wednesday. So I'll check you out then. Thanks.